Well, our Brussels correspondent Dave Keating joins us now. Dave, we heard them talking about massive consequences there in that declaration. What do you think they've got in mind?
That is the big question. I mean, yesterday the Ukrainian president was here in Brussels asking the EU to actually lay those cards out on the table, to say specifically what are the sanctions that would automatically come into place if Russia were to invade Ukraine. But the concern is that if the EU shows its hand too early, it could inflame the situation. It could have all kinds of unintended consequences. Now, we may find out in the coming days and hours if specific sanctions were at least discussed during the summit. But some of the more severe sanction possibilities that are on the table would be, one is for the EU to suspend Russian companies' participation in the SWIFT system of international bank transfers. That's been suggested in the past, never actually acted upon. It would have a really, really big financial impact on Russian companies and the oligarchs who support Vladimir Putin. Another possibility is Germany could suspend or cancel the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which is now almost complete, ready to bring more Russian gas to Germany. That is something that the new German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has not really wanted to commit to one way or the other about whether an invasion would spark a cancellation in that pipeline. But there is still a traditional reticence from several EU countries, notably Greece, Cyprus, Italy, Germany, who are usually softer on Russia, and those voices were today calling for more dialogue. So what we got with these Council conclusions that were issued tonight is kind of a compromise between the hardliners, the hardest of them being in Eastern Europe, and the dialogue-driven voices who say, look, we need to ratchet down tensions here, not inflame them, and we need to talk for more dialogue. And that's why they don't really want to talk about specific sanctions right now. But it was significant that this text was adjusted from an earlier draft version. One key phrase that was added was that restrictive measures would be coordinated with partners. That's surely talking about the United States. I'm told that the US State Department was on the phone with many European partners today, and that gave them the confidence to add this line into the conclusions. Whether that is a planned specific coordination with the United States on sanctions, we don't yet know, but certainly that was a significant addition to these conclusions that came apparently only in the final hours.
Yeah, they talked about engaging in diplomatic talks with Moscow. I mean, how do you see them getting Moscow to sit down and negotiate on this particular issue, Dave?
Well, specifically what these conclusions talk about is the Normandy format. So that's where Ukraine and Russia are sitting down at a table alongside Germany and France, and they're trying to resolve these outstanding issues between Russia and Ukraine. Of course, there are a lot of them. There have been a lot of them since Ukraine left the USSR. But of course, the biggest one right now is Crimea. Russia invaded Ukraine in 2014 and annexed part of Ukraine's territory. That is an annexation that Ukraine doesn't recognize. So there's a lot of dialogue that needs to be had there. The specific push here is to try to bring Russia back to the table to these talks, because there is a feeling in Western capitals that Russia has kind of walked away from that dialogue route and tried to instead use a kind of bullying tactic, more show of force, more intimidation. And still people don't know whether this buildup of Russian forces at the Ukrainian border is just part of that, part of the kind of bullying intimidation game, or whether this is legitimately a preparation for an invasion. Of course, we know that sanctions were not enough to stop Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2014 and its subsequent annexation of Crimea. The sanctions did come from the West after the invasion, but they weren't enough to stop Russia from annexing Crimea. And there are some voices that say that Putin has just calculated in these sanctions in terms of his whole plan here. He knows they're coming and he just somehow kind of prepares for them. There's a lot of unknowns here, and that's why there's a lot of people still calling for dialogue, because if tensions can be ratcheted down here, it's the best for everybody involved. Other voices, particularly in Eastern Europe, say that type of thinking is naive.
Okay, Dave Keating in Brussels, thank you very much indeed for bringing us up to speed.